Paul, thank you very much for agreeing to come on the podcast and sharing your career story with everybody.
Cool. Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, looking forward to the chat. Should be good.
Me too. So what we might start off with is maybe you could tell everybody, what it is you do for a living.
Sure. So Paul Clarke's my name. If you ask me what do I work at right now, I have a couple of businesses, but primarily the first business is called Connect Performance. So in that, from that perspective, I'm a performance coach, and I work typically with entrepreneurs, startup owners, and sometimes sales teams to help them unlock their personal and professional performance. So I guess help them learn how to access peak performance on a regular basis. That's my focus, and that's my niche. So obviously I'll coach and mentor and guide people, and I write about it, I talk about it, I speak about it. So that's one aspect of what I do right now. The other aspect is it's connected as well. It's also in the performance arena, and it's a sports performance, and it's a business called MatchFit. So I suppose through that, then I really work with sports teams, sports clubs, sometimes individual athletes and sports players. And the whole focus there is, again, performance, but looking at the performance model and seeing is that supportive of the outcomes that are required. So we're looking at things like coaching, strength and conditioning, sports science, and how you integrate those to support the outcome that you want in an athlete-centered environment. So it's kind of athlete-centered, coach-driven environment, and that's the outcome that we're after. It's to help people prepare better. The better you prepare, the higher the chance you gain of performing well, and obviously the higher the chance you have then of winning. So they're the two things that tend to occupy me at the moment.
Yeah, very interesting. And how did, maybe if we take it back, how did this all begin? If you take us back to your early years, how did you get into this?
Yeah, if I rewind, I kind of worked for myself in the entrepreneurial startup space since 2010. So in the 11, 12 years prior to that, I was working for Diageo. I was in sales / business development roles. So that was obviously kind of growing brands, building brands, joint business development plans with the on-trade publicans of a certain districts in Ireland. And then prior to that, it was different sales roles, yellow page advertising, which was interesting. And then things like, there was business equipment, state office stationery, that kind of thing, different roles like that. So I guess probably a lot of what I do is sales oriented. Even now, because I'm having to sell myself every day, I'm having to sell my message. So I guess I've been in sales for a long, long time, albeit with different focus. So it's actually sometimes selling a product, but now I'm selling a message. And that's been my life for the last largely 30 years, if you like. That has brought me to this point today.
Yeah. And even going back into, getting into sales, like what influenced you to get into sales day one? I mean, if we go back to your teenage years, I mean, what were you aiming for when you were starting off?
Yeah, I think when I look back at it, I think I thought I'd be good at it, because based on probably this false belief at the time that, it was all about talking, and I was pretty sociable, and I just felt, that I'd be pretty good at it. And it's kind of strange because I've come to laterally realize that I'm quite introverted by nature, but I'm comfortable enough in an extroverted environment, in a selling environment, which is it's a contradictory thing to say almost. But I think back then, I just thought it was all about talking, all about kind of showbiz, showmanship, this kind of thing, and I thought I'd be good at it. But then as I learned, quite quickly and over time, that it's more about listening than talking. But that's the skill set. So I think enthusiasm was probably the first thing. A lot of naivety about what it was all about. And also kind of seeing things like, the salary plus commission and then the on-target earnings and thinking, I'll have a bit of that. Without this kind of understanding that it's bloody hard to get on target. And even if you do, the target gets higher and higher and higher. So there was a lot of naivety in that regard. And then probably there wasn't many other things pressing my buttons with regard to, more vocational type careers. I find it hard to wire a plug, if I'm honest.
Like me, so.
I'm not very good kind of with my hands in that regard. Things like that were beginning to come on stream at the time, like computer programming, and that didn't really kind of press for buttons. So there was nothing really there that was pressing my buttons. I think that's why I kind of looked at the whole area of sales and selling. I kind of went, yeah, okay, you know what, that looks good. It seems like fun. It seems pretty sociable. You get a car. All of these, as I said, just being plain honest. I mean, it's just all these naive things. But then, yeah, you get into it and you find it pretty quickly. And it's a bit different. This is there's a bit more to it than meets the eye. That there's actually a high level of skill involved here, and ongoing, upskilling. And as I said, like, I hate using the term softer skills, but that there's a high element of capability required. But then there's also a high element of the softer skills required. Ability, is a huge thing, as distinct from capability.
Yeah. And it'd be great to maybe, if we can talk a little bit about your first roles in sales and maybe how you got that first job. But just before we get into that, like, did you have external influences that drove you towards sales? Was there people that in your life that, were in sales that you looked up to? Like, was there a trigger?
Not really, there was a couple of friends, all right. I mean, so my first, I guess, real role, if you want to call it that, from a sales perspective, it was through a friend that was working in that particular business, and he said they were looking for somebody. So, and he sold it pretty well to me. So I applied and got in on that basis. And then there was another role following that. Then again, it was just, I got contacted through a recruitment agency. It was with independent newspapers. They had a yellow page advertising outlet at the time. So I went for that. That's tough going. I mean, you if you want to learn about selling and sales, at the cold face, yellow page advertising is a place to be. It's bloody tough. I'm not sure, how applicable it is now these days with everything being online. But it was, and I would suggest still is, damn tough, and you need to know your P's from your Q's in that regard. So I think, yeah, I mean, the first one was not being pulled into it, but having a door kind of left slightly ajar for me to walk in through. Obviously, I still had to, work through the interview process, etc. Second one then was a case of, just being contacted by a recruitment agency, and then with Diageo, it was really a case of, just send them a letter, literally sending a handwritten letter in to say, I'd like to work with you guys, which it was Guinness at the time. How do we go about doing that? In my naivety, of course. And that was a case of keep knocking on the door. Eventually I got an interview and went through this process, which was interesting, like goldfish bowl interviews, all this kind of stuff, which I never had heard of before.
Yeah. I haven't heard. What are goldfish
effectively
bowl
it's part
interviews?
of the interview where, so say if there's 6 or 7 of us getting interviewed for a particular role, okay? At one, there's like the phase 1 interviews that might be 10, 15, 20 minutes. But then the next part of the interview day, if we want to call it that, is you're put into a room all around the table and you're given a particular topic or a particular scenario or issue or something like that. And all these HR heads are sitting around with their notepads, or well, they were notepads then, it's probably iPads now. And they're kind of, I guess, they're looking at body language and influencing skills and tonality and all of this kind of thing. So there's that. And then you kind of go back into a longer form interview. So it's a bit of a selection process, I guess, to see have you got stamina, and then to get a good look at you over the course of the day. The downside of it being that it's pretty bloody exhausting. It's like being poked and prodded from all angles.
Yeah.
That said, it was Guinness at the time, so you kind of willingly went through that kind of thing, and I see why they did it, because they want good people. That's the bottom line. They don't want duds.
Yeah.
So it was, luckily I got through all that, and I mean, I think on a lot of the basis that I got through it were the skills that I'd learned in the other sales roles, being able to actually sit across from the interviewer and answer questions, not necessarily verbally, but say, look, can I draw this out for you and show you? And they were well impressed with the ability to actually get a piece of paper and a pen and kind of take them through a particular process or a particular programming or a particular thing, like I think it was to do with markup percentages, blah blah blah, and actually work it out for them. And they're like, okay, yeah, this guy's, it's not just kind of prepared answers here. This guy's actually got a wee bit about him. So the skills that I'd learned in the other roles, actually the practical skills that I'd used on an everyday basis, came in very, very useful there. So that was good.
Yeah.
So that, the whole thing I got through that, and obviously then fell in with Guinness, and then became Diageo over a 12-year period, which was really, really good and really, really interesting. It was in business development roles. I said, I was working with on-trade, which is publicans. So really what you're looking at there is a different kind of selling, because what you're trying to do there, it wasn't say, look, buy Guinness off me. It wasn't that. What I was saying was, look at how can we operate together to get more bums on seats, get more people in your door more often. And yeah, sure, they mightn't all drink Diageo products, but because the portfolio is so strong, if we position it correctly, that puts me in a position to grow my share of the pie. So you were looking to help him grow his overall pie, and I was looking to make my slice of his pie a bit bigger. So it's a different form of selling. It's business development, but it's still selling, because you're still having to sell him on the efficacy of your messaging, on the veracity of your approach, etc., etc., etc. And because I can say it now, because I'm out of that game, because a lot of them had inherited businesses, etc. They didn't have a natural sense of business development themselves. And it was around the time, probably, if you kind of cast your mind back to the millennium time, when pubs, the rumours were all pubs are charging €100 in for that New Year's Eve and blah blah blah. And it never happened, of course, but all that talk kind of damaged the business, damaged the game. And it was around that time as well that there were far more alternative forms of entertainment. Things like people going to concerts, going to comedy gigs, etc., etc. Of course, there was some drinking involved, but it was taken away from the pub. So the pub as an entity had to up its game in terms of being attractive to the leisure pound, or the leisure euro, as the case was. But their skill set to do that, their natural skill set to do that, wasn't all that well developed. So there was that element of kind of staying a half step ahead of them and saying, look, we can grow this thing together if we both do this, if we both, put our shoulders to the wheel. If you do this and I do this, we'll come together, and then the pie gets bigger, and then hopefully my slice of the pie gets bigger. So that was kind of, I was largely successful in that, did a lot of good work there in terms of brand launches, etc. Some really, really interesting stuff, but it's like everything else, it runs its course. There was the opportunity to leave Diageo in 2010. I had this, I guess, fledgling sideline business, if you want to call it, set up, called MatchFit, which was sports performance, and it was very much down in the weeds. It was kind of really looking at things like fitness and strength and conditioning, etc., which was, even though it's not that long ago, it again was very much in its infancy. There weren't very many teams had a strength and conditioning coach or program, for example, around that kind of 7, 8, 9, 10 time. So left Diageo, jumped into that, jumped into MatchFit, and again, it was a new world working for yourself. So I left Diageo on a Friday. On a Monday, I was at my desk here. It was actually upstairs. I was at my desk going, okay, now what do we do? It was a case of kind of going hunting for business, because business doesn't necessarily come to you. So that was interesting. And that business evolved over time from being down in the weeds, almost doing it for them, to a model where you're kind of doing it with them and designing programming for them, and then evaluating. And as my experience level grew, because I'm kind of sports coach for 20 years, and because I've got good experience in sports science, strength and conditioning, and integrating these things, because I'm out on the grass myself coaching, so I understand the need to pull all these tools together to make them work together for the greater whole. So instead of kind of getting lots of information, it's about getting insights. So that's what my business evolved into, is helping people gain those insights. So it's not specifically working in coaching or strength conditioning or sports science to say, okay, you got these functions, but how, if you view them as cogwheels, how do they all turn together at the same time to make the machine work? Because if one of them is slow or underperforming, well, then the machine underperforms. So on their own, they're not necessarily the be all or end all, but when you take them all together and help them, facilitate them working well together, and bouncing off each other like a giant Venn diagram, if you like, or these cogwheels, it can be very, very powerful in terms of the outcome that you get. And that can give you a competitive advantage because you're trading off insights as opposed to, just information or old experiences that weren't very, very valuable, but you're still falling back in them because it's the easy thing to do. And a lot of that work then is encouraging people to rethink and reevaluate and ask better questions, and peel the onion, just keep peeling the onion to a point where they get to an answer. Not necessarily the answer, it's the answer in the moment, but then saying, okay, why might that be wrong? And then using the tools around you and the people around you and bringing that all together. So that's hugely interesting. I find that can deliver, good results for people, teams at every level. So I tend not to work with the very, very elite teams, obviously, because they've got their own sets of staff. But the teams that are underneath that level, I work a lot with, and then different kind of sports. So I don't necessarily have to know much about the sport because it's the other skills that I'm looking at, really, the things that I guess platform or scaffold that. So that's evolved over a period of time, and obviously it evolves too because you just can't keep being in the gym doing these things. You know what I mean? Doing the practical, cool, sexy stuff. You evolve to a level where you're I hesitate to say being thought leader because that's kind of very self-aggrandizing, but you're kind of looking at the profession as a whole and saying, okay, how do I future-proof myself here? So actually just operating in a silo may not be very future-proof because the tendency is for people within a silo, their competitive advantage is to do it cheaper. So that's what's happened, say, in the world of strength and conditioning. That's why, say, strength and conditioning coaches or sports scientists tend not to make good money, why they have to almost have a second job. It's because the default, in my eyes, the default thing within it to gain a competitive advantage is not the quality of your outcomes or your processes or your experiences. It's, well, Brendan's going to do it for €100, I'll do it for 80. But then Johnny comes along and does it for 70 and someone else does it for 60. And it's just this game of leapfrog. It's a real false thing. And you see it an awful lot, So for the value these people can and do deliver, they're underpaid. But then a lot of it possibly is because they're not selling themselves all that well on a consistent basis. So what I've tried to do in that regard is keep future-proofing myself to stay ahead of that. So I don't really have to very often kind of get into that, or you'll do a cheaper conversation. Because the world of sales and selling has really helped me do that because it's armed me with things like negotiation skills, influencing skills, presentation skills, all listening skills. All of these things that are massively important the first time you sit across from somebody to see, are we a good fit to work together? Or will I just kind of say after 10 minutes, listen, this doesn't feel right because my questioning skills are good enough to get to that point. And then B, if we do seem like a good fit to work together, how is this going to pan out? How are we going to implement this and what would a great result look like and feel like? And then, on the basis of that, then, right, what budget have you got for this to bring this thing alive? How important is this to you? And then we can decide whether we want to dance or not. So things I kind of take for granted because of my career in sales have been hugely valuable in my startup entrepreneurial kind of career, whatever you want as a business owner, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And if I can just jump in, and there's a lot to unpick in that, right? Because I think you have your early career, which brought you into sales, and then you moved into a huge global company in Diageo, and you brought your experience in there. And then you've used the combined experience to start up your own business in MatchFit. But if I take you back to the early days again for a minute, and I mean, the only foray into sales, Paul, that I had was when I was about maybe 20. What was I? I was probably 21, 22. And in Australia for 3 months, I was selling door-to-door telephone business.
Right.
And it was just a struggle, the rejection, the rudeness that people would put on you. It's just really challenging profession, I found in that short experience that I had. But when you started off and you had those early early roles. Can you talk a little bit to what were the biggest challenges you had starting off in a career in sales, but also maybe what did you love most about it?
In hindsight, I think the biggest challenges were my approach. It was this spray and pray thing, right? So, and it was kind of like, you see, it's easy to, Brendan, to default to this thing. Oh, if you make, the laps thing, leads, appointments, presentation, sales, yeah. If you get 100 leads, you make 50 appointments, you get 20 presentations, you get 5 sales. Now, there is a level of veracity in that, okay? But it's too straight line. You know what I mean? It's like if you do this, do this, do this. It's like mathematical, whereas sales is more of a chess game. Now you can play chess to different levels. You can play it to poor or outstanding. And you've got to understand the game and get into it and start kind of going, okay, how do I become a better player here? So player, if you substitute out sales professional, how do I become a better sales professional here? And that's another important distinction, by the way, is are you a sales professional or a salesman or woman, right? And they're two, it depends on how you see yourself. If you see yourself as a sales professional, then the onus is on you to get better, to behave professionally, understand what professional performance is all about. So that was a huge learning for me. And it was also obviously a huge frustration at the time because I was trying the same thing and expecting different results, which is nonsense. So quite quickly I had to understand that it's not about kind of hail fellow well met, keep knocking on so many doors, getting a bit lucky, etc. You can only sell to people who have something they want fixed that you can fix. That's it, regardless of what you're selling. And then it's about understanding the difference between wants and needs, making emotional connections, listening carefully, understanding, is this someone I want to work with? Is this a good fit for my product? Yes or no? If it's not right, cut it next until you understand the profile of the person that has the issue or the problem they need fixing that you can fix. And people would say, oh yeah, but that could be a very narrow amount of people. I go, great, because I can have an informed conversation with these people because it's like hand in glove. My hand fits into their glove. Why? Because they have an issue, I can fix it, and I can show how I've fixed it for people like them before. So I'm not trying to convince them of anything. I'm trying to help them buy a really good solution. And that was another key learning, that it's kind of almost kind of inverse logic. I'm not trying to sell you anything, Brendan. If you're what I deem as a good prospect or a good fit to work with, I'm going to try and help you buy the best solution. I believe mine is the best solution to your problems based on the questions I've asked you so far. And that's the process there. So it's like the sales interview is a huge learning as well. Now, the interview being a strange one that I'm listening more than I'm talking, obviously. But it's this interview kind of process to get to this point where I established that, yeah, do you know what? Brendan here is a bullseye kind of client. It felt that way, it looked that way before, but now because of the questions I've asked, I now know that. Now we can motor on to a place where we're looking about, the how. How do we implement all this thing? How do we fix your problem exactly? So those things were big frustrations, as is any learning thing, because you're getting out of your comfort zone and you're playing with live ammo all the time. Because you still have targets to hit, you still have numbers to hit. So there's frustration within that. You're trying to get across the line, but you're also trying to get better at the same time. So it's spinning a lot of plates, and especially when you're younger, that can be a bit of a head mess. It's. I think people kind of lazily default into sales roles. Maybe I kind of did too, if I'm honest. Going back to what we were talking about at the start, but quite quickly they've got to understand that it's a huge skill. And equally well, business owners have to understand it's a huge skill, because these are the frontline troops. These are the ones that deliver the revenue. They bring home the goodies. So the onus is on everybody to help these people be better. It starts with you wanting to be better, needing to be better, and seeing that. But then you need people around you helping you get to that point. Helping your improve your capability, help improving your performability. which is what I do with Connect Performance effectively.
Yeah.
So those were the kind of at the time, frustrations, but the big and valuable learnings.
And what did you enjoy most in the early days of sales? Was it the buzz of making the sale? But what aspects?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's this big adrenaline thing, you know. It's the buzz of doing something. It's the buzz of hitting target. It's the buzz of the rewards. It's an ego boost because obviously you're young, you're a bit more ego led. You know, you hit target, you get paid higher, you're able to buy nicer things, go to nicer places, etc. So it's very, very much that kind of extrinsically focused buzz. And then over a period of time, when you're focusing on getting better and better and better, maybe that's a function of age, it becomes more intrinsic. So it's the intrinsic rewards of being a peer group leader, being seen as a mentor kind of figure, being seen as a leader in a particular facet or area. You know, all those things are hugely beneficial. So they probably be the primary ones, yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of skill set then, Paul, and as you and I know, you can build skill sets, and you do over a career anyway,
Sure.
and lots of different kinds. But for people, again, starting off that want to get into sales, what would you say are kind of the basic things you should have at the ready?
Yeah, I think before you even think of the on-the-job, beyond the professional skills, we'll call it, like negotiation, questioning, listening, influencing skills, which are all massively important. What I came to understand throughout my career in sports performance was that there's a layer beneath that. And that's the layer of what I call performability. It's what I talk about with Connect Performance a lot. So performability, what's that? Well, it's something quite different to capability. Your capability is your natural skill set. So your capability, for example, is the things like your question skills, your influencing skills, your presentation skills, blah, 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 blah. But you need a high level of performability to be able to access those to a high level on a daily basis. And it's the bit that people miss, especially kind of in sales and startup owners, etc. What do I mean by this? Well, I kind of have an equation, if you like, to help people understand it. And my equation is performance equals capability by ability, ability being your performability. And largely your performability, that's your ability to perform, to access peak performance on a daily or regular basis. That ability acts as a force multiplier for your capability or a governor on your capability. So your skill set within your role, as I said, questioning, influencing, etc., in the sales role, is what it is. So if you're really highly skilled in those things there, say you're like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 in those things there, your performance, then the outcome you have is largely reliant on your ability to bring that alive every day, your performability, how your ability to feel and function well. And if your performability is down at a 4 or 5, now how do I understand that? Well, I say to you, how do you feel today, Brendan? I say, give it to me out of 10. 80% of people would say, kind of 5, 6. The average that I have in my own research is 5.4. You cannot really outperform that regardless of your capability. And you see this in the world of sport all the time. Guys and girls who don't train well, prepare well, regardless of their capability, don't perform well. It makes sense. Yet we go into, say, the world of sales or whatever, we kind of forget that. So, and it goes back to what I was saying about calling them sales professionals. If you begin to see them through the lens of being a professional and maybe equate them to being athletes, you begin to understand that, hang on, we've really got to focus on their capability for sure, but we also need them to have a high level of ability to access that capability. How are we looking at things on a daily basis that influence how these people feel and function daily? Because that has a major outcome on the result. So performance equals capability multiplied by ability. But what tends to happen is that most companies and businesses invest heavily in capability training, but misunderstand or ignore performability. And then wonder why they're not getting ROI, return on investment, on their capability training. It's because life is thrown these people all these issues that is bringing their performability score down, 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 down. And that has, as I said to you then, that's a governor on your performance.
Mm.
So people have really got to understand that, regardless of your age. So if you're younger, you're full of vim, you're full of, you're mad for it every day. But that's not always the case. The same with athletes, the same with sports players. You've really got to understand performability and kind of tools for that, principles of that we can share with you. And at the same time, in parallel, improve your capability on an ongoing basis, because things aren't going to get easier. The market is not going to get easier. There's not going to be less competitors. That's just not going to happen. The competitors aren't going to suddenly go away or get worse. They're going to get a bit better, naturally. And market conditions are going to change. So you've got to be able to meet those things head on. But if you haven't got a high level of performability, you're not going to be able to meet them, no matter your capability. It's just not going to happen over the medium to long term. And that's what I do at Connect Performance. Is to help people directly with that, if you like.
Yeah, really interesting and makes sense as well. And then, I mean, you when you moved into Diageo, I mean, that must have been a complete kind of culture shock in a sense from what you were doing previously.
Yeah.
What were the main challenges for you as you moved into a group like that starting off? And a second question then again is, what did you enjoy most about working for a company like that?
Yeah, I think the big challenge was working as part of an integrated team, because you had all these functions that I wasn't really subject to before, things like human resources, marketing, sales operations, all of these kind of things that I had to understand quite quickly, how these things helped me and how I had to help them, that it was this kind of organic environment. The brands, I hadn't worked with big brands like that before, and understanding the history, the provenance, all of that kind of stuff, how you're really a custodian of them. You're there to leave them in a better position when you're leaving than maybe when you found them, if you can move that needle on a little bit. So they were the things that, they were the big challenges, but at the same time they were quite enjoyable, because you work with brands, iconic things like Guinness, like Smirnoff, like Bailey's, Carlsberg, Budweiser. I mean, massive brands in their own right individually. But all of a sudden you've this in a portfolio, so you kind of got to understand the business dynamics of beer, of spirits, of wines, all booze, but all different. And then be able to have different conversations, obviously external conversations, internal conversations. So you had internal customers, you had external customers, you were trying to sell your message internally to get better resources, etc. So they were all massively enjoyable, and we work with good people too. All massively enjoyable. The passion piece was really enjoyable, because everyone there loved Guinness, not just actually loved drinking it, but do you know what I mean? They had a high level of buy-in to the brand thing. I mean, it was like a badge, literally a badge that you wore. So that was all massively enjoyable and challenging and problematic at the same time, which is quite kind of contradictory, I think. But looking back, but then no growth or no progress is without pain. Because you're breaking the glass ceiling all the time. You're punching through it, which is hard and it's problematic and painful. But it's like everything else. The joy is not the outcome. The joy is the process, the journey, as people call it.
Yeah.
So what was the second part of your question then? It was
what did you enjoy most out of that experience? But I think you've covered that.
Yeah, I think that was it. I mean, I enjoyed the pain.
Yeah, and then
in hindsight, I mean, it wasn't really pain, to be fair, but
yeah, but you do learn a lot. You learn a lot from those experiences.
You learn to embrace the discomfort. Eventually, you kind of understand that without discomfort, there's no growth.
Yeah, that's true.
So that was, and then the people I got to meet and work with, there was some really talented people,
Yeah, and you spent 12 years there, Paul, and then, I mean, we can move into Match Fit. I mean, what was and this would be interesting, I think, for a lot of people. You've kind of bought in, as you said, to the brand of a company. You feel part of it. You spent 12 years of your life working with them, and now you're going to move on. You're going to start your own business, and that seems a bit like a marriage, maybe of passion with sport as well, but also all the stuff that you learned along the way. Was there a moment or a trigger that made you say, I'm going to take the plunge now? And how did that come about for you?
Yeah, I think it was an itch that needed scratching. There might have been a bit of ego. There was a little bit of spotting the gap and the opportunity. So there was probably a mix of those things, naivety as well. You know, I can do this. Not fully understanding that it's a completely different baby. You know, the money wasn't going into the bank on a Friday or the last Friday of the month or whatever it was, that you had to put the money in. But there was all, so yeah, naivety, passion. You know, they're all really powerful fuels. You don't know what you don't know at the time. You don't know how hard it is. You don't know how challenging it is. You don't know what it is to work on your own. So now all of a sudden, I didn't have a sales operations backup, a marketing backup, a human resources backup, blah, 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 blah. I was that. So yeah, all of those things were yeah, daunting. I kind of do look back and go, Jesus, was a stone mad. You know,
Yeah.
but that's from the position now. But I think the trigger possibly was the itch that needed scratching, but it was also, say, in the sense with Diageo, our roles were getting a little bit more process driven. Not that there's anything wrong with process, but I probably felt that the individuality was being stripped away from it. I got, or I get now, why they were doing that, and you know, I don't have any hassle with it, but it kind of just, at that time, I kind of went, maybe this is not for me anymore. It was just felt that we were it was this marriage, we were kind of drifting apart a little bit.
Yeah.
It didn't mean that, it wasn't that, you know, I didn't like them or anything. I mean, I can only say good things about them still, you know. If someone tells me, oh, I think I'm going working with them, I say, yeah, Jesus Christ, jump in, you know, by all means. So it wasn't that acrimonious split where I couldn't wait to get away or anything like that. It was nothing like that at all. It was more on my side. It wasn't them, it was me.
Yeah.
But it was down to, as I said, just that itch that needed scratching, and you know, working in sport is kind of sexy looking from the outside.
Yeah. And it's
The
something,
truth is,
I mean, I think it's an incredibly brave thing to do, Paul, because like lots and lots of people have that itch that they want to
yeah,
scratch, and most people won't scratch it, right?
sure, yeah,
When it
yeah.
means giving up the safety net of employment, like regular employment.
Mm.
What would, if there was one piece of advice that you'd give to someone that's taking that plunge today, what would you say to them based on the experience you had of making the transition?
I would say 100 times out of 100, before you do it, have good conversations and find a really good mentor or mentors that have made lots of mistakes and can supply you with learnings and pointers and guidance and that kind of thing. I didn't really do that because I knew everything.
Right.
You know, but I definitely say that you've got to get a mentor or certainly mentors that can help you progress, revisit things, rethink things, reposition things, share their errors, their mistakes, their learnings with you, so that you don't have to learn through pain all the time, and you can expedite the process a little bit by learning from these people. I think that would be a huge thing. The other thing is that, and I go back to again about your own performability, because we've all kind of buckets of energy, but it's up to us to keep that bucket topped up, and you've got to know how to do that, or else you reach burnout stage. You know, because the grind, Brendan, has become fetishized, right? You know, 14 hours a day, 9 days a week, blah blah blah. The grind. Listen, it makes great marketing content on YouTube or whatever. It's cool, it's sexy, it's a really attractive thing. But the reality is different. You've got to understand how to work smart, particularly when you are the marketing department, you are the sales department, you are everything. You know, you've got to understand how to kind of keep your bucket full, and only through mentorship can that happen as well. So I think it's having that range of mentors that have subject matter expertise in different areas that can kind of go, right, do you know what, maybe you need to think about doing this or this. You know, someone you can talk to about how do I market this, someone you can talk to about your own performance, how you feel and function daily, you know, how you get through bad times, etc. Someone that can talk to you about sales and selling, someone that can talk to you about just business operations, simple things like, tax returns, things
Yeah.
that just come along and trip you up. Things like
Yeah.
that you kind of go, well, is that not done for you? No, you got to do
Yeah.
it yourself. You got to get an accountant, but you've also got to do A, B, and C to help the accountant get you the best result. So there's all these dynamics that you don't really get, but that the access to a mentors
Yeah.
can help you, as I said, expedite that.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant advice. And I don't know if it's a symptom of age, but certainly I think that knowing it all, I could look at myself in my 20s and see similar kind of profile in myself. But as you get older, you do realize really how important mentors are. Just people, whether they're friends, whether they're family, could be a colleague,
Yeah,
that can just be a
100%.
sounding board for you. It makes a massive difference.
I think the other thing, there's one other thing I'd say to people is to niche, is to take the time, invest the time to find your niche. What I mean by that is if you're selling a service or a product or whatever, that everybody can't be your customer. If you invest the time to find out quite quickly who your bullseye is and niche it down, so it's like me saying to you at the start, really I cast my net out for entrepreneurs and startup owners. Why? Because I understand that world, because I am one. I do work with sales teams as well. Why? Because I understand that world. I am one.
Yeah.
So, I kind of get them. If I was to say, oh, I'm trying to get, let me see, accountants or solicitors or something like that, there's a bit of a mismatch going on there. So it's like chasing three rabbits around a field. Which one are you going to catch? You're not.
Yeah.
Because you're
Yeah.
chasing three rabbits. So the quicker you niche down to understand, I sell bottles of water to accountants,
Yeah.
in Ireland, in Meath, or whatever. You just narrow it down. Now, intuitively, people will go, oh yeah, but that's narrowing the amount of people you can get to. Like, exactly. That's exactly what you want to do, because you're not commoditizing yourself then. You've got a solution that fits these people exactly. Your key fits their lock that they can't open. Simples.
Yeah.
So it allows you to get away from that commodity thing, that price-driven conversation, etc., etc. You've got a solution to a very real felt need. Now, if they have value on fixing that, and that value, well, then we're in business. So in my world, I understand in pounds, shilling, and pence, the value of an entrepreneur being able to perform better on a daily basis.
Yeah.
That they can access peak performance on a daily basis. Because if they don't, the business is going to go south. That's just it. And talking to people that understand that, they can correlate the high level of value in euros to that, and it's a different conversation. Because if we understand that them performing to a higher level or improving their personal performance, say by 20% on a consistent basis, is to them worth, just plug a figure in the sky, 40,000 a year. And we both know that, we both understand that, we both agree that. Why are we getting into a conversation about a couple of €100 on my fee?
Yeah.
When their return on investment is probably typically 6 to 8x.
Yeah.
And it gets away from that nonsense of, oh, you'll do it a bit cheaper. Sorry. It doesn't actually happen then. Well, it does happen, but then you get to kind of say, okay, we're not the best fit to work together. We'll just cut this now. So it's understanding all of these things, but you need people to help you. And it goes back to the first point that about the mentors. You've got to do it on your own, but you can't do it alone. And then a mentor will help you with the niching piece then as well, because they'll have done it. So that there's this relationship between all of these learnings that I can share. Really, they don't exist in silos. They're all linked together. Really.
Yeah, you've said it a couple of times now, Paul. You mentioned it just there about backing away and saying we're not a good fit, and you said it earlier about the importance of listening and understanding what a client needs. How important, and for someone that I'm not in sales myself. How important is it to know the balance, even for longevity in a career, of being able to say, no, I'm not going to sell you this because you don't need it? Because oftentimes we see, right, that it's the sale. It doesn't matter if people need it, we're going to sell it. Like, how important is that to understand early?
I would say massively important. I think by nature we all want to be liked. But that's not going to get us anywhere. We become people pleasers then, as opposed to solution providers. So yeah, do I want to get on with the people I'm selling with? Yeah, because people buy off people, but people buy off people like them. So the people I'm selling my stuff to, whether it's in Match, Fit or Connect Performance, I live in those worlds, so I'm a person like them in that regard. After that, then it's a matter of seeing, does my key fit in the lock, or do we have to kind of jiggle it a bit to open it? And if we have to jiggle it a bit, in my experience, that can end up in friction and fallout and all these kind of things, and go south later on and cause a lot of problems, and even problems to the extent of, and I see it, I sell some sports technology through MatchFit to enable the process to take place. It ends up with people becoming resentful. And I've done it, by the way. I've sold people technology because they wanted the toy. I knew deep down, you're not able to use the toy. But I've still sold it to them. And where it comes back to bite me then is the phone call, the email. This isn't working. Yeah, but you're not using it the way I told you to use it, or I showed you to use it. Then there's another phone call. Oh, it's not good. This won't do this. This won't do that. Right, well, you never told me I had to. But then when I look at and turn the mirror back at myself, I've got to own that, because did I ask the right questions at the start to weed that out, to understand, the tripwires down the road that would be fatal. I ignored, looking back, I would have ignored them and hoped they didn't happen, but they do happen. And then the problem is they eat into your time, they eat into your mood. They bring about friction with the client, the customer. And you can head all of that off at the pass at the start by understanding, look at what a great fit looks like is this, boom, 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 boom. And you can understand by asking the right questions, etc., etc., etc. So you can go back to what I was saying about price earlier on. I mean, if I'm going to charge you €5,000 and you tell me your budget is €1,000, it ain't going to work.
Yeah.
Now, we can make it work. You can stretch the budget out a bit and I can come back, but how far am I willing to come back? And then I come back to say €1,200. I'm kind of going, yeah, but am I going to be happy in 6 months' time with that? No.
Yeah.
So it's understanding the longer game. Now, a bit of that is you get through experience, but go back to the mentor thing. You can leapfrog having to have the bad experiences by having good advice from people that can tell you, look, here's what's going to happen. Put your house on it. And sure, you might have to put your hand in the fire and get burned from time to time, but quite quickly you'll understand, you know what, I need to listen to this guy or girl because they're going to set me right. And they're vitally important to have.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice, Paul. And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here now, right?
Sure.
If we could, break physics and you could go back and I gave you 5 minutes with your 18-year-old self.
Yeah.
Tell me, what would you say to yourself? What advice would you give?
Okay, 2 ears, one mouth. Use them in that proportion, at least. There's that. I would say stop trying to get a perfect outcome. Like the thing to aim for is being directionally correct, because there's no straight lines in life, or very, 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 very few. So if you're kind of directionally correct and you learn to pivot and you embrace the pivoting as part of the process, it's like, there's a mate of mine does sailing, and he'll tell you that if you want to go from point A to point B, you never ever go in a straight line. It's the same as taking a flight from Dublin to New York. It never goes in a straight line. It's all over the place. Why? Because you figure out what's directionally correct, what you got to navigate around, and conditions change on a daily basis, an hourly basis. But it's embracing that. So that's probably number two. I think number three, then it's not mine necessarily, but something that I've learned the value on, and it goes back to kind of listening more. Is seek. It's the Stephen Covey thing. Seek to understand before you're understood, and that's about really kind of listening hard and understanding the person or people in front of you, the audience in front of you, before you do this kind of verbal vomit where you want everyone to understand you. And that's kind of ego driven. So that would be another one, is kind of as quickly as possible put away your ego. They'd probably be the primary things I'd say to myself. Yeah.
Great, brilliant, Paul. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I really enjoyed the conversation, and maybe we can chat again in the future.
100%, anytime.
Yeah, and for everybody listening, we will also put the links to your businesses in the comments on LinkedIn, and we'll put it in the description on YouTube as well. But it's been great, Paul. Thank you very, very much, and we'll keep in touch.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. Thank you.